Hello everybody, this is Johns Hopkins with Baltimore Heritage, and we're back with another of our 5-minute Histories videos. And I'm down here on Commerce Street, which is appropriate in the old financial district, because today we're going to talk about the Chamber of Commerce building behind me. And we're going to talk about the building, and we're going to talk a little bit about why people who were most concerned about the price of corn also really got into architecture. And this fabulous Renaissance revival building behind me is the result. But let's start with the corn and cereal. Not the cereal that you had for breakfast, but the kind of cereal that is traded. If it's 1850 in Baltimore and you are trading in grain, you are in the nation's leading exporter of grain. Baltimore, with its deep water port and its 3 railroad heads here, the B&O, the Western Maryland, and the Pennsylvania Railroad, all of them were bringing grain in from the farmlands, and we were putting it on boats and sending it out to the world. We were the leading exporter of grain. And things back then were a little bit chaotic and very individualistic. Most of the trades took place at various merchants' offices. But in 1846, things changed. And that's when a group of people came together, a group of corn traders came together and formed the Corn and Flour Exchange, the Baltimore Corn and Flour Exchange, to try to put some standardization in the industry. They did it in 1846 in particular because that was one year that Ireland was going through a particularly bad famine. And the Irish were really in need of more imports for them of grain, but also the price was fluctuating wildly. And so here in Baltimore, one of our chief markets was Ireland, and we decided, or at least some folks decided, to put some standardization there. Things started out pretty simply. The merchants came together on Bowley's Wharf, and they all brought out their barrel heads and put samples of grain on them, and the buyers would come by and pick out grain and pay, not negotiating over price, because that had already been set, but by negotiating based on the quality of the grain. Things did pretty well for a while, but one cold, particularly cold February in 1852, apparently the merchants had had enough of being outdoors, and they decided what they needed was a building with heat. And they came together, they had a big meeting, and 137 of them decided to chip in to buy 2 buildings, combine them, and turn them into the Merchants Exchange. And that they did. Things were going pretty well for a while, and they were growing. In fact, they were growing so much that they built a new building right on the wharf again so they could see the ships coming and going. And that was in 1860. In 1872, the B&O Railroad built the city's first grain elevator, and our grain market skyrocketed because of that. The Corn and Flour Exchange folks, now up to 350 members, needed even a bigger space. And they built the building on the site that's behind me. A little bit of a ruckus among members because it was no longer right on the water, but enough of them agreed that they built this building. And things kept going well for the corn and flour trade until the 1890s. In fact, it went so well that the group changed its name from the Corn and Flour Exchange to the Baltimore Chamber of Commerce. They were hoping to lure in other trades as well, but that really never happened. It's pretty much stayed as a grain exchange. In fact, in 1924, 2 other groups came together, the Merchants and Manufacturers Association and the Board of Trade, and they formed what we would really consider a Chamber of Commerce, but that name was already taken, so they had to call themselves the Association of Commerce. But despite the maybe purposefully misleading name, the new Chamber of Commerce continued to grow until 1904. And that's when the Great Fire happened, and we are squarely in the burnt district. This building was pretty much walloped. Everything above the foundation was destroyed, although some brave firefighters were able to scale the side of the building with ladders, and with the combination to some safes, they were able to pull out the most important material from there. But the rest of the building was burned down to the foundation. The corn traders, this is where they take take on their architects' hats out and put them on. The corn traders decide that they believe in Baltimore and they want to show it. And so it's still in 1904, one of the first groups to build back after that February fire. They build this wonderful building, Renaissance revival in architecture style. I don't know if they were thinking about it, but the revival of Baltimore and the revival of that style are a nice coincidence. And they do a bunch of great things. They include rustication on the building, egg and dart cornices. The wonderful corners are held together with what's called coining, and it's built in this glorious brick, which is a little bit different than the surrounding buildings, which would be rebuilt in stone, but it allowed the Chamber of Commerce folks to rebuild quickly. And the building itself was big and grand. On the 4th floor, it had a two-story grand hall for the merchants to exchange products. It had a rat skeller in the basement, so you could go down and do your business over lunch. It even had a water-powered elevator, a newfangled thing for the day that apparently worked up until the 1980s. I don't know if it's still working today, but maybe it is, who knows. And it had chalkboards throughout the building that were updated with the price of grains, particularly in Chicago and Liverpool, two of our main sort of market and trading partners. But things did not go well for very much longer than that. By the 1940s and 50s, the building became vacant. And that was really due to 3 factors. One was the telephone. With a telephone on every desk, why do trade merchants need to get together in person to do their deals? The second was the Federal Farm Bureau. It was established in 1929 in the Depression to try to bring stabilization to grain prices, but it also got the federal government into the buying and selling of grain and really hurt private grain dealers like the ones here at the exchange. And the third thing was federal involvement in setting railroad rates, also in the 30s and 40s, to try to bring some standardization there. And I don't know the reason, but apparently the rates for the trains going into and out of Baltimore were higher than the rates for our competitive ports like Norfolk and Boston. And so we lost business there. But the building didn't sit vacant for long. For a while in the 80s and 90s, it was occupied by the Baltimore Culinary Institute. Chefs were in there training. And today it is a hotel, the Staybridge Suites Hotel. And I will end on this note. If I were the general manager, I would put not chocolates on everybody's pillows, but little bags of wheat thins with the price tag still on them. Maybe I'll go make that suggestion. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.